Enugu moved at its own pace, slower
Buy your
than
fresh
Lagos,
groundnuts
prouder
here.
than most
Come and
places
buy
would
your
admit. The
groundnuts.
coal city still carrying itself like it remembered better days and expected them back. Ada was 24, though the years had put something old and careful in her eyes that made people misjudge her age in both directions. She lived in a two-room flat off Agbani Road with her uncle Emeka, his wife Adaeze, and their two children, Chibuike, who had finished university the year before and now worked at a bank branch on Okpara Avenue, and Ngozi, who ran a small but growing fashion business from a shop near New Haven. Ada had come to Enugu as a child, after her parents died within the same rainy season back in their hometown, from a fever the local clinic had no proper drugs to treat. Relatives had gathered, some to grieve, some to argue over the small plot of land her father had left, and one, Uncle Emeka, to take her back to Enugu with him. She's family, he told the elders then, loud enough to be admired for it. I'll raise her like my own. It had sounded generous. In practice, it meant Ada got a mat in the storeroom instead of a bed, and a tray of goods to hawk instead of a school bag, from the time she was old enough to balance a basin on her head. She had grown up inside that arrangement and never quite escaped it. Now, at 24, she still woke before 6 every morning, while Adaeze pressed a basin of boiled groundnuts or a cooler of chilled zobo into her hands. Ogbete first, then go round by the park, Adaeze would say, the same words she'd used for nearly 15 years. Don't come back until it's finished. So Ada walked down Agbani Road, past KK Napeps weaving through traffic, past generators coughing outside shops still waiting for NEPA to restore light, past hair salons with speakers blasting high life into the morning air, calling her wares in a clear, quick voice that made even hurried traders stop and buy. She could count change faster than most bank tellers, spot a counterfeit note by feel alone, argue a KK rider down from an inflated fare without losing her temper. She was, by any honest measure, sharper than most people who'd sat through 12 years of formal schooling. Nobody in her uncle's house had ever thought to notice. Uncle, she had asked, more than once over the years, the last time only 2 years earlier, let me sit for WAEC as a private candidate. I can still sell in the evenings and on weekends. I've been teaching myself. I only need someone to pay the exam fee. Emeka had waved a hand without looking up from his phone. 22 years and you're still talking about school. You should be thinking of a husband, not an exam hall full of small children. He'd laughed, not unkindly, which somehow made it worse. Face your hustle, Ada. She hadn't argued. Arguing brought Adaeze's sharp tongue and a smaller portion at dinner, but she hadn't accepted it either. In secret, over the years, she had taught herself to read fluently, then to write in a clean, careful hand, then to work through mathematics far beyond what her uncle assumed she needed, trading garden eggs for an old JSS textbook here, borrowing a neighbor's phone for 10 quiet minutes there, studying by candlelight and phone torch long after the compound had gone silent. Nobody around her had noticed the mind she was quietly building. She had simply refused to let their refusal become her ceiling. The fever came at the start of Harmattan, the way sickness sometimes does when Enugu's dust thickens the air and half the city is coughing. It began as a dull ache behind her eyes that Ada tried to walk off on a market morning, her tray balanced despite the fog settling over her thoughts. By evening, she couldn't stand straight. By the second night, she was burning hot enough that Adaeze, more anxious about what people would say than anything gentler, finally sent for a chemist's assistant from the shop down the road. This is not ordinary malaria, the woman muttered, pressing a thermometer to Ada's forehead and frowning at the number. Take her to Aunt. They didn't go immediately. Hospital bills were hospital bills, and Emeka spent 2 days arranging things while Ada burned on her mat. By the time a church sister arrived to pray loudly over her, the whole compound had already begun murmuring that Emeka's niece, the market woman, people called her, with more familiarity than respect, was not going to survive. Adaeze, sitting beside the mat on the fourth night, began to cry. Not the deep grief of someone who loves without condition, but the frightened weeping of a woman beginning to understand she might have to answer, if only to herself, for how she had treated someone for so long. Neighbors gathered the way Enugu neighbors do, some out of genuine concern, some drawn simply by the shape of the event, and by midnight several of the older women were already discussing, in low voices over tea, what cloth would suit a burial so unexpected. They mourned her while she still breathed. Ada would remember that clearly, much later, and find it strange rather than bitter, that she had heard, from somewhere far off and yet very near, the particular hush of people already grieving her. Then, deep in that fourth night, the fever broke, not gradually, but suddenly, like power returning after a long, dark outage. Ada woke gasping, drenched in sweat gone cold, her eyes open and startlingly clear. But her eyes did not look the same. When the chemist's assistant returned at dawn to check on her, she took one look at Ada's face and stepped back, nearly upsetting a stool. "Ah," she said softly, in a tone that had nothing to do with medicine. "So that is what almost took you." "What do you mean?" Adaeze asked, relief and unease tangled in her voice. The woman, Sister Nkechi, as Ada would come to know her, who split her days between the chemist counter and quieter, half-secret work helping people whom hospitals and prayer houses alike had failed to fully heal, did not answer Adaeze. She knelt in front of Ada instead, studying her the way one studies someone freshly, properly met for the first time. "Tell me," she said quietly, "what is standing behind your uncle, near the door?" Ada, still weak, turned her head and saw a tall, thin shape near the doorway, still as smoke that has stopped moving, the shape of an old man in an outdated agbada, waiting patiently for something. "There is someone by the door," Ada whispered. "He is not one of us." The room went silent. Emeka, who dismissed such talk as superstition, felt the hair rise on his arms all the same. "You have been given sight," Sister Nkechi said, with the calm of someone who had seen this before. "Sometimes, when a fever pulls a person right to the edge and then lets them return, they come back changed, able to see what the rest of us cannot. It does not happen to everyone who survives such sickness. It happens to very few." She looked steadily at Ada. "You are one of the few." "See what?" Ada asked, though part of her already knew. "Spirits," Sister Nkechi said, "the dead who have not yet moved on. From today you will see them as easily as you see anyone walking down Ogi Road. It will frighten you at first, but it is not a curse, whatever anyone in this room is thinking right now." She glanced, not unkindly, at Adaeze, whose face had gone pale. "It is rare, and it is always given for a reason." The weeks that followed were the strangest of Ada's adult life. She had always assumed Enugu, quiet as it could be, compared to Lagos, held only the living, its calm streets and old colonial-era buildings simply calm and empty after dark. Now, she understood, they never had been. Walking home from Ogbete in the evening, she began noticing shapes standing quietly near the closed stalls after the traders packed up. An old woman arranging invisible wrappers at the exact spot the cloth sellers used every day. A young man in an outdated conductor's vest pacing near the park, as though still waiting for a bus that would never arrive. At first, she ran. She would grip her tray too tightly and hurry the rest of the way home, heart hammering. She told no one except Sister Nkechi, who became, over those weeks, the closest thing to real family Ada had known in years. You must not fear them, Sister Nkechi told her one evening, in the back room of the chemist shop, where she kept her herbs and oils. Most of them mean no harm. Most are simply stuck, caught between here and wherever they are meant to go, held back because something was left unfinished. Some are waiting for a wrong to be corrected. Some are waiting to pass a message to someone still living. Some do not even know they have died and wander confused until somebody brave enough helps them understand. Why me? Ada asked. Why not someone with money, with people who could protect them if this became known? Sister Nkechi smiled, sadness and something like pride mixed together. Maybe because you already know what it is to be overlooked, she said. A woman who has sold groundnuts in the market for 15 years while people half your age with far less sense walk past you into offices. Nobody looks at you twice, do they? You have learned to move through this city quietly, to notice things others rush past. That is exactly the kind of person the dead learn to trust. God does not only give his gifts to the comfortable, Ada. Sometimes he gives them to the ones who already know how to carry weight without complaint. Over time, Ada's fear settled into something steadier. She learned to nod politely to the shapes she passed instead of fleeing. She learned most of them did not even register her noticing, too caught in their own private loops. And she noticed too that Adaeze and Emeka had begun treating her with a new, uneasy caution, unsure whether the niece they had underpaid and overworked for so long now carried some power they didn't understand. They didn't become kind exactly, but they became careful, and for Ada, careful was already more than she had known. It was on an ordinary Wednesday, selling groundnuts near the New Market Road junction, that everything changed again. Ada was calling out, "Groundnut," beside a row of packed keke napeps when she felt someone watching her. She turned and found a young woman standing at the edge of the junction, close enough to touch, though none of the passing traders or commuters seemed to notice her at all. She wore a fitted office dress, the kind young women wore to work at banks and telecom offices around Okpara Avenue, and her face, young, perhaps in her mid-twenties, not far from Ada's own age, was streaked with tears that never fell, just sat, glistening, frozen on her cheeks. Ada had grown used to the quiet, drifting dead. This was different. This spirit's eyes fixed directly on hers, sharp with the kind of desperation you see in someone drowning who has just spotted a hand reaching toward them. "You can see me," the woman said, her voice thin, as though carried from very far and very close at once. Ada checked quickly that no one living was close enough to think she was speaking to air, then murmured, low, the way she'd learned to. "I can see you. What is your name?" "Amara," the spirit said. "My name was Amara." "How did you die, Amara?" The frozen tears seemed to tremble, though still they did not fall. "That is why I have come to you," she said. "I do not fully remember. I recall leaving my office near Okpara Square late one evening. I worked in customer relations for a small transport company, and getting into a car I believed had been sent to take me home. Then darkness. Pain, here," she touched her own throat, though no mark showed now. "And then I was standing over my own body along a quiet stretch near Trans-Ekulu, and no one could hear me scream, not even the people who eventually found me and called it a hit and run." A chill moved through Ada, despite the afternoon warmth. "Someone killed you, and they let it be called an accident." "Yes," Amara whispered, "and the person responsible has never been named. My family believes I died in a road accident. They buried me with that lie sitting on top of everything, and I cannot rest under it. I have wondered 2 years now, watching my mother light candles for an accident that never happened the way she thinks. Watching the man who did this walk free, greeted with respect all over this city, because everyone assumes wealth means innocence." "Who was it?" Ada asked. "I do not see his face clearly. It is like reaching for a dream after waking. The closer you grab, the more it slips. That is often how it is for those who die suddenly and violently. The moment itself is hardest to hold on to, but I remember pieces. A gold signet ring with a dark red stone, the kind wealthy contractors and landlords wear in this town like a badge, the smell of expensive cologne and cigarette smoke. And I remember he called my name before that car door opened, which means he knew exactly who I was and exactly where to find me that night. What do you want from me? Amara's endless eyes locked onto Ada's, fierce with sudden hope. Find him, she said. Find the man who ended my life and let my mother believe a lie for 2 years. Bring the truth out so I can finally rest and so she can finally grieve for what actually happened instead of carrying a false story forever. Do this, Ada. I have been watching you longer than you know, and I have seen how unfairly this life has treated you, and I promise what is owed to you will also be paid. Before Ada could ask anything more, Amara's spirit thinned like heat haze over hot tarmac and was gone, leaving only the ordinary hum of the junction rushing back around her. Ada did not sleep that night. She lay on her mat, turning Amara's words over. A signet ring with a red stone, cologne and cigarettes. A man who knew her routine well enough to intercept her at night, respected enough that nobody had ever seriously questioned him. The next morning she went straight to Sister Nkechi. You must be very careful, the older woman warned once Ada had told her everything. A man who has killed once and walked free for 2 years is not someone who will welcome a market woman asking questions about him. But you are right to help her. A spirit denied justice does not simply fade with time. Her grief poisons the ground she is tied to and can curdle into something dangerous to herself and to those around her. Better she is helped now, gently, than left to grow bitter. How do I even start? I don't know his face, only pieces. Then gather more pieces, Sister Nkechi said. You have a gift most detectives in this town would envy, my dear. You can question the dead directly. Go back to where Amara believes she died. The city remembers what people forget. And ask around, carefully, about her family. Every death leaves a trail among the living too, not only among spirits. So Ada began. Through careful, unhurried questions to older traders at the market, women who loved nothing more than a good story if a fellow trader seemed genuinely interested, she learned that Amara had been real, a young woman from Trans-Ekulu, daughter of a widow named Mama Blessing who sold provisions from a small kiosk near the railway line. 2 years earlier, Amara had been found dead along a quiet road near Abakpa, officially a hit and run, though some had whispered even then that the story didn't fully add up, since Amara had always been careful and always called her mother when she was on her way home. There was talk, one of the older provision sellers admitted, glancing around before lowering her voice, that Amara had caught the eye of a certain big man before she died, a contractor, handles government road projects, owns property all over New Haven and Independence layout. But nothing ever came of the talk, because who accuses a man like that without proof? Accusations cost the accuser far more than the accused, especially in this town. Which man? Ada asked, keeping her voice light. Chief Okezi, the woman murmured. You have probably seen his name on signboards near the construction sites. Okezi and Sons, building Enugu's future. He wears a big gold ring with a red stone, struts about like Enugu belongs to him alone. Ada's pulse quickened. A ring with a red stone. Over the following days, she visited the quiet stretch of road near Abakpa, where Amara believed she had died, walking it slowly in the evening. Amara herself did not appear there, perhaps unable to fully return to the site of her own death. But Ada felt, standing at that particular bend, an unmistakable heaviness, a wrongness. Even the Okada riders seemed to rush past without quite knowing why. She also made her way, carefully, to Mama Blessing's kiosk near the railway line, buying a few items she didn't strictly need, and gently mentioning she had heard of her daughter and was sorry for her loss. The widow's eyes filled instantly. My Amara was a careful girl, she said. She always called me the moment her ride started moving. Always. That night, nothing came. I have never fully believed it was a simple accident. But what can a widow selling magic cubes and matches do against the word of an important man in this town? Important man? Ada asked carefully. Mama Blessing hesitated, glancing toward her kiosk door as though even now, 2 years later, she feared being overheard. Chief Okezi's people came to my shop not long after Amara died, she whispered. Brought rice, brought a small envelope, said it was from the chief's heart, that he wanted to support a grieving widow in his community. But nobody hands out gifts like that without a reason. I have wondered every single day since what that reason really was. Ada left the kiosk certain she had found the thread Amara needed her to pull. Suspecting Chief Okezi was one thing. Proving it was another, and Ada understood, with the same sharp practicality that had kept her steady through 15 years of market life, that a woman without a school certificate or family standing could not simply walk into a contractor's office and accuse him of murder. She would be laughed out, or worse, silenced, before her voice reached anyone who mattered. She returned to Sister Nkechi. I know who it is, Ada said, but no one will believe a groundnut seller over a man whose name is on half the signboards in this town. Sister Nkechi thought for a long while, stirring a pot of herbs without really stirring it. Then you must not accuse him with words alone, she said finally. You have to bring him face to face with something he cannot argue away. Spirits, when they are strong enough and desperate enough, can sometimes be seen, briefly, by more than just those with the sight, especially at moments of great emotion or in places closely tied to their death. If Amara is willing, if her grief and hope are strong enough, perhaps she can be persuaded to show herself where others might catch a glimpse too, enough to shake a guilty man into revealing himself. How would I even arrange that? There is the annual community development event coming, Sister Nkechi said slowly, an idea forming. The one Okezi and Sons sponsors every year near Independence Layout. Free food, a live band, local dignitaries, cameras everywhere because he loves the attention. Every big man who wants to be seen as generous shows his face there, and from what you've told me, Okezi is exactly that kind of man. If Amara's spirit appeared there, before a crowd, right when her name is somehow spoken aloud, his guilt might do the rest. Guilty men are rarely as composed as they pretend. A shock in front of cameras and neighbors could break even a big man's calm. Ada went back to the road near Abakpa that evening and called for Amara until, at last, she appeared, the setting sun catching the frozen tears on her face. I have found him, Ada told her. Chief Okezie. He wears the ring you described. Your mother believes he had something to do with your death, though she has never dared say it out loud. Amara's face twisted with grief so sharp it seemed to chill the air around her. Yes, she breathed, the name unlocking something in her fractured memory. Yes, I remember now. He kept sending messages after I helped coordinate transport for one of his site openings. Asked me, more than once, to be his special friend. Kept for himself an apartment, an allowance, everything hidden, the way some of these big men do with young women. I refused him. Told him I was seeing someone else, a man from my own street, with nothing but an honest hustle to offer. He laughed when I refused the second time. Said nobody refuses him twice. Her voice cracked between a sob and a growl. The night I died, I had just refused him for the second time, over the phone, only hours before that car pulled up beside me. Will you help me? Ada asked. At the event, Will you show yourself, even for a moment, so people can see the truth? Amara's grief-filled eyes met Ada's. For 2 years, I have barely had the strength to be seen by anyone but those with sight, she said. But for justice, for my mother, for the truth she deserves, I will find the strength, even if it costs me the last of what is holding me together in this world. The day of the event arrived bright and loud, high life and Afrobeats blasting from speakers set up on the grounds near Independence Layout, banners reading Okezia and Sons, 10 years of building Enugu's future, strung between flagpoles, and a small stage where local dignitaries would soon be introduced. Ada stood near the front of the crowd, heart hammering, having told no one of her plan except Sister Nkechi, who watched quietly from a short distance away. Chief Okezi arrived fashionably late, as expected of the man footing the bill, a deep burgundy agbada, a walking stick more for show than support, and on his right hand, exactly as described, a heavy gold ring set with a dark red stone catching the afternoon light, as he waved to applause and posed for a photographer's phone. The program began. A pastor offered an opening prayer. A local councillor gave a short speech about road projects and community development, and an MC worked the crowd with easy, practiced charm, calling out names and small tributes to keep the energy high. It was during the MC's roll call of friends of the community, sponsors, community mothers, long-time residents deserving recognition, that the moment came. And let us hear it for Chief Okezi. The MC called out, mic crackling across the grounds. Developer extraordinaire, friend to widows. A big shout to Mama Blessing, who Chief has personally supported since her time of loss. At the mention of that name, for Ada had quietly, gently, arranged for Mama Blessing to be invited that day as a small honored guest. Nothing more. The widow, seated near the front, let out a sudden, sharp sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob, 2 years of grief rising unexpectedly at the public mention of her daughter's memory, tangled with her own. In that same instant, as heads turned toward the widow's cry, the air near the stage seemed to shimmer, cold despite the afternoon heat. And there, for the span of 3 heartbeats, visible not only to Ada, but to a scattering of phones held up nearby that would later show something blurred and inexplicable on camera, stood the shape of a young woman in a fitted office dress, her tear-streaked face turned directly toward Chief Okezi, her arm raised, pointing. The crowd did not collapse into chaos immediately. Most who caught the glimpse doubted their own eyes, blinking against the sun, sure it was heat haze or a trick of a passing generator's exhaust. But Chief Okezi did not doubt what he saw. His walking stick clattered off the stage. His face, moments before beaming for the cameras, drained of color. He rose so suddenly that a nearby councillor reached out to steady him, and in the silence that followed, even the band fumbling to a stop, sensing something had gone terribly wrong. Okezi's mouth opened and closed twice before any sound emerged. Amara, he choked, loud enough for the front rows and, crucially, several phones still recording, to hear clearly. I told you, it was an accident. I never meant. The word accident, from a man who had insisted for 2 years he barely knew the dead woman, landed on the crowd like a dropped stone. Murmurs rippled outward. Phones turned fully toward him now, recording. Mama Blessing rose from her seat, her grief hardening instantly into something fiercer. What accident? She cried, voice cutting across the grounds. What do you know about my daughter's death, Chief? Okezi, still staring at the empty space where the spirit had stood, for Amara had already faded, her strength spent, her purpose achieved, seemed to crumble under 2 years of buried guilt, suddenly exposed in front of an entire crowd with their phones raised. Perhaps it was the shock of seeing her, perhaps guilt carried long enough in silence, simply breaks once a crack appears. Whatever the cause, he did not deny it further. In broken, halting sentences, before the counselor, before Mama Blessing, before the entire crowd and its recording phones, he confessed how he had sent someone to intercept her that night after her second refusal, how the confrontation had turned violent in a way he claimed even now he hadn't fully intended, how he had arranged for the body to be found and let the hit and run story stand, how his gifts to the grieving widow had really been an attempt to buy silence disguised as sympathy. What followed in the weeks after, the video clips that spread across WhatsApp and social media before the day was even over, the police finally opening a real investigation under public pressure, the formal charges, the collapse of Okazi and Sons' reputation almost overnight, was, in its own way, a whole other story, one Enugu would talk about for months. But for Amara and for Ada, the ending that mattered had already arrived in that single, trembling moment on the grounds at Independence Layout. That night, long after the crowd had scattered and half the city was still replaying the viral clip on their phones, Ada walked to the quiet stretch of road near Abakpa one last time. Amara was waiting, and for the first time since Ada had met her, the frozen tears were gone. In their place was something new, a calm, quiet peace, like a long queue at NEPA finally moving. "You have given me what I could not give myself," Amara said softly. "My mother knows the truth now. She will grieve properly, at last, instead of carrying a lie handed to her, wrapped in rice and envelopes. And the man who took my life will answer for it among the living, as he must." She stepped closer, and though she had no true warmth left to offer, Ada felt something like gratitude settle over her all the same. "You did not have to help me, Ada. You have suffered enough in your own life without carrying the dead's burdens too. But you did it anyway, with a kindness few people, living or dead, are willing to give a stranger. That is not small. In this life, that might be the rarest thing there is." "What happens to you now?" Ada asked. "I am free to go where I should have gone 2 years ago," Amara said, no fear in her voice, only relief. "But I promised you something, and a promise made to the one who freed me is not one I will break." She raised her hand, and where her fingers pointed, toward a battered metal trunk half buried under rubble near an abandoned building site off the Abakpa Road, the ground seemed, for a moment, to glow faintly, lit from beneath by something that did not fully belong to this world. "Before she died, my grandmother sold her small piece of land back in our hometown and never trusted banks with the money," Amara said. "She hid it, meaning to hand it down properly, but died before she could. I only learned where after my own death, wandering this road with nothing else to do but remember what the living forget. It was meant for my family. But my family, though not wealthy, has a roof and love enough. You, Ada, you have neither the money nor the schooling you deserve, nor the family who should have cared for you properly all these years. I ask my grandmother's spirit to forgive me for this, but I give it to you instead. Not as payment. What you did cannot truly be paid, but as a beginning." Ada dug through the rubble with trembling hands until she found the trunk, its lock rusted through, and inside, wrapped in old cloth gone soft and grey, stacks of naira notes from an earlier currency series, and beneath them, foreign currency and a handful of gold jewelry, more wealth than Ada had ever imagined holding in her own two hands. When she looked up to thank Amara, the spirit was already thinning, bright and fading like the first light of dawn, breaking over the hills that ring Enugu, until, with one last small, grateful smile, she was gone entirely. Not vanished into nothing, Ada felt certain, but finally, truly, at rest. What happened after is the part of the story that made the local news for a week, and that Ada's old market friends still bring up whenever she passes through Ogbete. Ada did not keep her fortune secret, nor did she flaunt it foolishly. She went first, quietly, to a lawyer recommended by Sister Nkechi, and with careful, patient explanation, leaving out, for everyone's sanity, the full truth of ghosts and buried trunks, and speaking instead simply of an inheritance discovered through a family contact, had the old currency and jewelry properly valued and exchanged. It was even conservatively a sum large enough to buy a small plot in a rising part of the city, build a modest house, and fund not only her own education, but the education of others besides. She did not forget Uncle Emeka and Aunt Adaeze, though she did not forget what they had denied her either. She offered them a modest gift, enough to ease their household, but she did not offer to move back in as their unpaid help. And when Adaeze, suddenly, awkwardly warm now that Ada's fortune was public knowledge, suggested she come back home properly, as a real daughter should, Ada, with the same quiet steadiness that had carried her through years of hardship, declined, and instead built her own small, sturdy flat near Sister Nkechi's chemist shop, close enough to learn from her freely, far enough to finally breathe. She sat for WAEC as a private candidate that same year, passed with results that surprised no one who actually knew her, and enrolled the following term in a university foundation program, studying alongside people years younger than her, without a trace of shame, her years of secret self-teaching by candlelight and phone torch giving her a head start few of her classmates had. And she never stopped seeing spirits, nor tried to. In time, quietly and carefully, guided always by Sister Nkechi's wisdom, Ada became known, first around Ogbete and Abakpa, and later, as word spread through the city the way things do, well beyond it, as a woman who could help the restless dead find peace, and who never once demanded payment from a grieving family too poor to give it, though those who could afford to thank her generously often did, adding, slowly, to a fortune that only ever seemed to grow because Ada used it as generously as it had first been given to her, funding WEC and JAM fees for market traders' children who reminded her sharply of herself, contributing boreholes for streets without reliable water, always with the quiet understanding that a gift, once given freely, was meant to be passed onward, not hoarded. Chief Okezi's fate unfolded exactly as such things do in stories Enugu tells for months afterward with grim satisfaction. Stripped of his contracts, his properties seized or sold off to settle the lawsuits that followed, and finally standing trial, the viral footage from that development day, impossible to explain away. As for Ada, she grew, in the years that followed, into a woman known throughout her part of Enugu not for the person she had once been, unwanted, unschooled, sent to hawk groundnuts while relatives her age moved into offices and universities, but for the woman who had walked between worlds and returned each time with more compassion than she had left with, who had turned her own suffering, rather than letting it harden her, into the very thing that let her recognize suffering in others, living and dead alike, and actually do something about it. And on quiet evenings, when the market had packed up and the streetlights buzzed on over Agbani Road, those who knew where to look, and who had, perhaps, faced their own quiet hardships, might still catch a glimpse of a woman walking those streets alone, unafraid of the shapes gathered in the dusk, greeting them softly, the way one greets old, familiar friends.